What if the weapon that flipped the Battle of the Atlantic didn't come from a lab, but from a ship's kitchen? In 1943, as German U-boats tore through Allied convoys, a forgotten merchant cook noticed something no admiral or scientist had seen. His crazy idea about sound underwater didn't just save ships. It changed naval warfare forever. March 1943. The North Atlantic has become the most dangerous place on Earth. Allied convoys fight their way through towering gray seas, carrying the food, fuel, and ammunition Britain needs to survive. Every ship is loaded to the rails, and every one of them is loud. Beneath the waves, German U-boats are not searching blindly. They are listening. U-boats hunt by sound, sitting hundreds of feet below the surface engines. Silent hydrophone operators track the steady rhythm of propellers and the deep vibration of machinery. A convoy doesn't have to be seen to be found. It announces itself across miles of ocean. By the time Allied escorts sense danger, the wolf pack is already in position. The consequences are devastating. In a single month, German submarines sink more than 500,000 tons of Allied shipping, the worst losses of the entire war. Entire convoys are shredded. Hundreds of sailors disappear into freezing black water. Britain, dependent on imports for survival, is reduced to just weeks of reserve supplies. Lose control of the Atlantic and the war is effectively lost. Allied commanders know this, and they are running out of options. They deploy sonar, enforce zigzag routes, and impose strict radio silence. New detection technologies are rushed into service. But none of it fixes the real problem. Sonar only works in a narrow forward cone. U-boats attack from the sides, from behind, or on the surface at night. Radio tracking fails the moment submarines go quiet. And when they do, the convoys themselves become the loudest objects in the ocean. Scientists soon deliver a brutal conclusion. Merchant ships are inherently noisy. Their slow-turning propellers create cavitation perfectly tuned to German hydrophones. Engines vibrate through steel hulls directly into the water. Making them quieter would require redesigning ships from the ground up, months in dry dock, massive industrial retooling, and resources the Allies simply don't have in the middle of a war. The verdict is final: merchant ships cannot be silenced. Inside naval headquarters, optimism collapses into grim arithmetic. Ships are being sunk faster than they can be built. Escorts are stretched thin. Air cover can't reach the centers of the Atlantic. The strategy quietly shifts from winning to surviving. Add more escorts, absorb the losses, and hope enough cargo gets through to keep Britain standing. It isn't a plan, it's a gamble. And far from the admirals, the charts and the experts aboard a pitching Liberty ship in the open Atlantic, the man who is about to challenge that conclusion isn't a scientist or an engineer. He's a cook listening closely to a ship everyone else has already written off as hopelessly loud. Thomas Patrick Lawson doesn't belong in the engine room, but that's exactly where he spends his free time. While most crewmen escape the heat and the noise as soon as their shift ends, Lawson goes deeper into the ship. He isn't an engineer. He's the cook, but he's listening. The Liberty ship vibrates like a living thing. Turbines scream, pipes rattle, the propeller shaft hums through the steel hull. To everyone else, it's just overwhelming noise. To Lawson, it's information. Different tones, different rhythms. The ship isn't just loud, it's broadcasting itself into the ocean. Then during a convoy run, a torpedo hits a merchant ship nearby. Lawson hears the explosion, but what follows stops him cold. As seawater floods the stricken vessel, the sound changes. The deep mechanical vibration fades, becomes hollow, and then vanishes. The ship hasn't disappeared, but to German hydrophones, it might as well have. The machinery noise is gone, smothered by water. That moment changes everything. Lawson realizes the enemy isn't hearing the ship itself. They're hearing vibration escaping into the sea. And water, unlike air, absorbs vibration. If flooding a ship silences it, then maybe water could be used without sinking the vessel. He tries to explain it, shouts over the roar of the engines. What if parts of the ship were deliberately filled with water, not flooding controlled sealed chambers placed around propeller shafts and engine mounts to soak up vibration before it reaches the hull? The response is instant. Confusion, then ridicule. Water inside a ship means you're sinking. End of discussion. But Lawson can't drop it. For weeks, he sketches rough diagrams in a notebook, water-filled chambers, improvised ballast vibration barriers. He shows them to engineers. They laugh. Officers dismiss him. The captain thanks him politely and tells him to stick to the galley. When the ship finally docks in Liverpool, Lawson has 2 days of shore leave. Instead of resting, he does something reckless. He walks straight into the Royal Navy's Western Approaches headquarters and demands to speak to someone about convoy noise. Security grabs him immediately. Restricted area. Get out. And that should have been the end if not for one exhausted escort commander who's just returned from the Atlantic after losing ship after ship. He overhears Lawson talking about sound, about silence, about water, absorbing vibration, and he stops. Commander Peter Gretton has heard plenty of bad ideas. After 2 years escorting convoys across the Atlantic and watching ships burn, despite doing everything by the book, he's learned to distrust easy answers. So when a merchant cook starts talking about silencing ships with water, Gretton's first instinct is to dismiss it. But he doesn't, because nothing else is working. Gretton brings Lawson to a corvette sitting in dry dock in Liverpool. No paperwork, no permission. Just a quiet, unofficial test before anyone higher up can shut it down. If the idea fails, it disappears. If it works, everything changes. The setup is crude. Oil drums welded around the propeller shaft, makeshift containers pressed against engine mounts, filled with seawater and sealed shut. It looks like a plumbing accident, not a military innovation. Even the ship's engineer mutters that it's a waste of time. The first test confirms everyone's doubts. A friendly submarine submerges nearby hydrophones active. The corvette powers up. Loud and clear, same noise, same detection range, total failure. The engineer smirks. Told you so. But Lawson notices something critical. The water-filled drums aren't actually full anymore. They've leaked. The water that's supposed to absorb vibration has drained away. The idea didn't fail, the execution did. Gretton hesitates. Unauthorized modifications are already pushing his luck. Fixing and retesting could end his career. But so could doing nothing while convoys keep dying. He makes the call. They seal the chambers properly, reinforce them, add water-filled bladders pressed tight against vibrating machinery. No elegance, no theory, just function. Days later, they try again. The corvette heads out at speed. The submarine dives listening. Minutes pass. Then a signal comes up. The submarine lost contact at 400 yards. Beyond that, the ship vanished into background ocean noise. The room goes silent. They haven't just reduced the noise, they've nearly erased it. For the first time, a ship is quieter than the sea around it. Gretton understands the implications instantly. U-boats that once heard convoys from miles away would now have to close in dangerously close right into sonar range, radar range, visual range. The hunters would be exposed. There's no more debate. This can't stay hidden. Within days, Lawson, a merchant cook with no rank and no degree, stands in front of Britain's senior naval leadership. Admirals, intelligence chiefs, the same experts who declared silence impossible. They challenge everything: stability, corrosion, safety, credentials. Lawson doesn't argue theory. He explains what water does to vibration. He explains what they tested. He explains what worked. The room is divided until the numbers come out. Detection range reduced by 97%. Finally, the man at the top makes the decision. 6 merchant ships, 1 convoy. Real combat conditions. If it fails, the idea dies. If it works, the Battle of the Atlantic will never sound the same again. 6 merchant ships. That's all Admiral Horton approves because that's all he's willing to risk on a cook's idea. In 8 days, convoy ONS 184 will sail out of Liverpool into the exact killing zone where U-boats have been tearing convoys apart. And scattered inside that formation will be the test. Lawson's quiet ships modified in secret-like speed, with steel cylinders welded around propeller shaft housings and water-filled bladders pressed against the machinery that normally screams into the sea. The work is brutally simple. No miracle alloys, no new engines, no redesign, just sealed chambers, seawater, and placement. Each ship takes roughly a couple days. The added weight is manageable, but the look of it ugly. Improvised, like someone bolted a plumbing system onto the heart of the ship. Skeptical engineers shake their heads until the hydrophone trials hit them in the face. Before a Liberty ship can be picked up from roughly a dozen miles away, after less than half a mile. Not a little better. 20-something times quieter. Then the convoy sails. April 22nd, 1943, 43 merchant ships in columns escorted by corvettes and destroyers pushing into open Atlantic darkness. Nobody tells the convoy commodore the full story. If the Germans attack, this won't be a lab test. It'll be a real fight with real torpedoes. German intelligence has already tracked the departure. A wall of U-boats is waiting along the route, and one of them, U-264, begins to listen. At first, the hydrophone operator reports something that doesn't make sense. The convoy signal is there, but it's wrong. Some ships sound normal, loud, clear, easy to track. Others fade in and out like ghosts. The captain frowns. Either you hear a convoy or you don't. That's how it's always been. So he goes to periscope depth. And there it is, ONS 184 in the moonlit chop. The convoy is real, but the sound picture doesn't match the sight picture. His hydrophones should be painting all 43 ships. Instead, he's only tracking a portion of them. 6 ships scattered through the formation are effectively invisible, quieter than the surrounding ocean. The captain makes a decision that feels logical in the moment and disastrous in the long run. He targets only what he can hear. The wolf pack attacks over the next hours. It's still brutal. Ships go down, men end up in lifeboats. Cargo disappears into the Atlantic. But the statistic that matters, the one that makes London go silent when it comes in, hits like a hammer. None of the modified ships are among the sunk. 0. They rode through the same ocean, the same threat, the same formation, and the U-boats slid right past them. When ONS 184 finally reaches Port Gretton, wastes no time. His signal to headquarters is short, cold, and impossible to ignore. The quiet ships weren't lucky. They weren't spared. They weren't even noticed. Under combat conditions, the system worked. And in that moment, the Battle of the Atlantic starts to tilt, because the Germans have just lost the one advantage they relied on most: hearing you coming. The response from London is immediate. What happened on ONS 184 is no longer an experiment. It is a warning and an opportunity at the same time. Within days, orders go out across the western approaches. The modifications are approved, quietly at first, then at full speed. Dockyards that were already exhausted are given a new priority. Crews begin welding sealed steel chambers around propeller shafts. Water-filled bladders are pressed against engine mounts and steam lines. There is no elegance to it, no polished design. It is fast, rough, and effective. Installation time drops from days to hours as crews learn the trick. The cost is a fraction of building a new ship. The payoff is survival. As more modified ships slip into convoys, the Atlantic starts to sound different. German U-boat commanders notice it almost immediately. Hydrophone operators report strange contacts, convoys that fade in and out, ships that appear far closer than they should be. Some vessels seem to vanish entirely. Wolfpack coordination begins to break down because submarines cannot agree on where the targets actually are. To attack now, a U-boat has to close the distance, and that changes everything. At half a mile, the submarines are no longer hunters in the dark. They are exposed. Escort sonar begins to find them. Radar picks up surfaced boats at night. Aircraft arrive faster. Depth charges follow. The ocean that once hid U-boats now betrays them. May 1943 becomes a nightmare for the German Navy. Submarines are lost at an unprecedented rate. Crews do not return. Patrol lines collapse. Admiral Karl Dönitz is forced to admit the truth in his war diary. The enemy has robbed U-boats of surprise. The most powerful weapon they had is gone. For the Allies, the numbers tell the story. Ship losses plummet. U-boat losses soar. The Atlantic does not become safe overnight, but the balance has shifted. The hunters are being hunted. And at the center of it all is Thomas Patrick Lawson, a merchant cook who never fired a weapon, never commanded a ship, and never set out to change naval warfare. He simply paid attention when everyone else accepted defeat. By summer, hundreds of ships carry his idea into combat. By the end of the year, thousands more follow. The Battle of the Atlantic will continue until 1945, but its outcome is no longer in doubt. Sometimes, victory does not come from better weapons or bigger fleets. Sometimes it comes from one person noticing what everyone else missed and refusing to stay quiet about it. By mid-1943, the Atlantic has changed sides. Convoys are no longer easy prey, drifting blindly into ambush. They move with confidence now, their acoustic footprints dulled, their presence muted. U-boats that once waited in silence are suddenly the ones being surprised. German reports grow confused, then alarmed. Hydrophone logs describe an ocean that no longer behaves the way it should. Sometimes convoys are detected from a distance. Other times, ships seem to appear out of nowhere, already inside danger range before a submarine can react. Wolfpack tactics collapse because coordination depends on sound, and sound can no longer be trusted. Captured German sailors say the same thing during interrogation. They thought their equipment was failing. They thought the sea itself had changed. One hydrophone operator describes it best. It was as if the Atlantic had gone quiet. For Allied escorts, that silence is deadly for the enemy. U-boats now have to creep closer to find targets, and that brings them straight into detection range. Sonar locks on. Radar spots surfaced boats at night. Aircraft arrive before submarines can escape. Depth charges follow. Where convoys once died, unseen U-boats now do. May becomes known among German crews as Black May. Submarine losses spike to levels that cannot be replaced. Entire patrols vanish. Experienced commanders are lost. Morale cracks. The strategy that once nearly starved Britain into surrender is no longer sustainable. Behind all of it, there is no secret superweapon, no revolutionary machine. Just welded steel seawater and a simple understanding of how sound moves through the ocean. Thomas Patrick Lawson does not celebrate. He does not give interviews. He does not ask for credit. He returns to his ship and his routine supervising installations when ordered, then stepping back into anonymity. To him, it was never about brilliance. He noticed something. He said something. Other people made it real. After the war, navies around the world quietly adopt the idea. The system evolves. Water chambers give way to air bubbles. Machinery noise is masked instead of amplified. What began as a cook's observation becomes standard practice, still protecting warships decades later. Lawson himself returns to Boston, opens a small diner, raises a family. Most people never know what he did. His obituary barely mentions the war. But the men who came home because U-boats could no longer hear them never forget. Sometimes history turns not on rank or education, but on attention, on someone willing to listen when everyone else accepts the noise as inevitable. The war grinds on for 2 more years, but the outcome in the Atlantic is no longer in doubt. Supply lines hold. Britain stays fed. Armies gather train and eventually cross the channel. None of that happens without ships getting through, and ships get through because they are no longer shouting their position into the sea. After the war, the navies of the world quietly take notes. Engineers refine the idea. Water-filled chambers evolve into systems that release streams of air bubbles along a ship's hull, masking machinery noise before it can escape. The principle stays the same: break the path between vibration and ocean. What began as a rough sketch in a cook's notebook becomes standard equipment on modern warships. Thomas Patrick Lawson never becomes famous. He receives a medal in a small ceremony, shakes a few hands, and goes home. He refuses interviews. When reporters ask him how he solved a problem that baffled experts, he shrugs it off. He didn't invent anything, he says. He just noticed something and spoke up. Back in Boston, he opens a diner. he raises a family. To customers, he's just another man behind a counter pouring coffee. To history, for a long time, he's almost invisible. His obituary barely mentions the war. It certainly doesn't mention the thousands of lives saved, or the fact that a critical naval advantage of Nazi Germany vanished because one man refused to ignore an odd detail. Years later, when naval academies teach innovation, they tell his story, not as a tale of genius, but of attention. Of someone without rank or credentials who questioned what everyone else accepted as unavoidable. Someone who listened when others dismissed the noise as background. Because that is the real lesson of the Atlantic in 1943. The most dangerous phrase in warfare is not "we don't know." It's "that's impossible." And sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is one person willing to listen closely enough to hear the silence coming. By the time the Atlantic War finally ends in 1945, the numbers speak more clearly than any medal ceremony ever could. Tens of thousands of Allied ships have crossed oceans that were once death traps. Millions of tons of supplies reached Europe instead of the seabed, and thousands of sailors lived long enough to go home, start families, and grow old. Very few of them ever knew why their ships survived when others didn't. Thomas Patrick Lawson never corrects the record. He never stands on a stage or tells his story in his own words. When historians eventually track him down decades later, he seems almost uncomfortable with the attention. To him, the idea was obvious once he noticed it. Ships make noise. Water absorbs noise. Everything else followed naturally. The world's reaction to it still feels strange. Yet his idea never disappears. Long after the war, naval engineers refine it, modernize it, and quietly build entire doctrines around it. The principle becomes standard control, what the ocean hears. Modern warships use advanced systems descended directly from Lawson's crude water chambers. Different materials, better engineering, same logic. Silence is protection. Inside naval academies, his story becomes required reading. Not because he was trained, but because he wasn't. Cadets are taught that innovation does not belong exclusively to experts or rank. It belongs to whoever is paying attention. Whoever is willing to question assumptions everyone else has stopped questioning. When Lawson dies in 1991, his obituary is modest. A merchant marine veteran, a restaurant owner, a family man, no headlines, no dramatic language, just a quiet ending for a quiet man. At his funeral, a few elderly British naval officers attend, men who once stood watch on escort bridges in 1943, men who lived because U-boats could no longer hear them coming. One of them leaves a note behind, tucked out of sight. It reads simply, "Because of you, we came home." And that may be the most accurate summary of the entire Battle of the Atlantic. Not fleets, not flags, not speeches. Just one person noticing something everyone else missed and having the courage to speak up before it was too late. Years later, the U.S. Naval Academy would distill Thomas Lawson's story into a single lesson for future officers. Innovation, they taught, does not begin with authority or credentials. It begins with observation. Lawson didn't defeat U-boats with superior firepower or advanced theory. He did it by noticing a detail everyone else had ignored, then refusing to let it go when told it was impossible. In war, experts are often trapped by what they already know. They optimize within existing rules, existing systems, existing assumptions. In early 1943, the experts all agreed on one thing: merchant ships were too loud, and that reality could not be changed in time. Lawson never accepted that premise. He wasn't trying to solve the entire problem. He was simply asking why a sinking ship went silent. That question broke the stalemate. His solution didn't replace radar sonar or air patrols. It made them lethal. By forcing U-boats to close in acoustic dampening, stripped submarines of their greatest advantage, surprise. Once that edge was gone, the balance of the Atlantic shifted permanently. The Allies didn't just survive the U-boat threat, they crushed it. Lawson never saw himself as a hero. He never sought recognition. But his impact was measured not in theories or reports, but in lives saved. Thousands of sailors who would have vanished into the Atlantic instead went home because their ships were no longer shouting into the deep. History often remembers generals, admirals, and grand strategies. But sometimes history turns on something quieter. A moment of attention. A refusal to dismiss an odd detail. The courage to speak up when everyone else says that's impossible. Thomas Patrick Lawson changed naval warfare without firing a shot, without rank, without formal training. He changed it by listening. Today, every modern surface warship still carries the descendants of his idea. Different technology, same principle: control the sound and you control survival. 80 years later, the ocean is still being shaped by what one merchant cook noticed in the engine room of a rolling Liberty ship. The Battle of the Atlantic was not won by noise. It was won by silence. And sometimes the difference between defeat and victory is one person who hears what everyone else has learned to ignore.